Well, alright everybody, welcome to the 2024 iPad Setup Guide or Beginner Guide. In this video, what I want to do is if you got an iPad during the holiday season and you want to kind of start using it and maximize everything that comes with the iPad, this is going to be the perfect video for you. I'm going to walk you guys through how to set it up, the lock screen, the home screen, gestures, navigating everything, the ins and outs of the iPad. I've been an iPad first user since about 2018, so I like to think I have a pretty decent idea of how to use the iPad. Now, 95% of what I mentioned will apply to every single iPad, whether it is an entry-level iPad or a fully loaded iPad Pro. There's going to be that last 5% that's going to talk about mostly the M-powered iPads with things like Stage Manager. So grab some popcorn, grab a drink, grab your iPad, and let's learn how to use this thing. Let's get into it. Well, alright everyone, let's get right into this video, and the first thing I'm going to mention about the setup guide is that I am running iPadOS 17.2, so depending on when you're watching this, you could be on 17.2 or you could be on a future iPadOS update, but just know that no matter what iPad you're on, everything that I'm going to mention, especially here in the very beginning, is going to be regarding every single iPad in the lineup, so the iPad 10th Gen to the iPad Pro. It's only towards the end that I'll let you guys know and notify you that this is specific to a certain iPad. But I thought the best way to get started for a Get Started guide was to actually look at the lock screen. So the lock screen recently became customizable, and the way that you customize it is that you long press on the lock screen and then you'll get this new menu. Now this menu allows you to create multiple lock screens, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a brand new lock screen from scratch, and as you can see, I have a few different saved ones that get activated based on focus modes, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But to create one from scratch, you're going to press this plus button right here, and it's going to ask you to pick basically a wallpaper or something of that nature. So there's different wallpapers that Apple gives you to choose from that are nice, and then also kind of auto-generates wallpapers based on your images and things like that. So you have your pets, you have your babies, things like that. You also have your weather and astronomy type wallpapers, which are actually dynamic, basically letting you know and kind of adjusting to not only the weather, but also your location, which is cool to see. So I'm going to pick just a random one, stay simple with it. We're going to go with astronomy, and then this is what you're greeted with. So you get some auto widgets on the side, you get your wallpaper, you get your time. Now all of this is customizable on iPadOS 17. So if you're familiar with an Apple Watch, you can see that it's very similar to how an Apple Watch complication is set up. So if you just tap up here, it lets you decide what widget you want on that top. So right now it just gives me the day as well as the date. So if I actually wanted to do the weather, I could just click on this and then it'll give me the day, the date, and the weather as well. So depending on what you want, you can do your calendar, you can do your clock widget, you can do your health, so anything that you have scheduled in terms of if you have any medication you need to take. All things that you can decide to do with this little widget right here. I like to keep it as the weather. And then if you tap on the numbers right here, which is your time, you can change the font, you can change the font type, the font color, you can change the font thickness if you want to. So if I want to do this one and make it as thick as I can and make it a blue color, you can then do that. And you can even change the hue of that blue color, which is awesome. And then this one just auto generates. So if I tap on that, it pretty much just picks a font color that's going to go best with your wallpaper. So this is almost like a pure white, which is nice to see. I'm going to make this a little smaller. And then there we have our time. So that is how you adjust those two. And then you can actually swipe through these if you want to decide what type of Earth wallpaper you want. So you can zoom in a little bit and you can see that it just pinged my location to let you know like that's where you are. You can also choose different planets. So you can choose a different planet like Venus. You have Mercury on here, and then I believe you also have the moon. So these are all made by Apple. And the same thing applies. So you can see that it's kind of covering over the actual time itself. Same thing will happen when you have an actual portrait image or maybe a picture that you took yourself that has somebody in focus. You can then have that being overlaid to give it kind of a more of a pop-out feel, which is cool to see. So I'm going to leave it as the Earth one to kind of show me my location, which is cool. And now let's move over to the widgets. So these lock screen widgets were recently introduced with iPadOS 17, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So you tap on here, and then you can actually delete all these. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to delete these. All you have to do is press a little minus button, and it gets rid of them. And again, these are predetermined by Apple, so depending on which app you have installed on your iPad, some third-party apps will let you use widgets on the lock screen, and these widgets are different than the widgets on the home screen, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But for instance, if you want your clock on there, it'll just start to auto-populate, and it'll auto-populate from top to bottom and from left to right. So if you have a smaller one, it'll go on the left-hand side. And what's nice about it is that you can actually just move it completely. So if you want to grab this precipitation percentage over here and move it onto the bottom, you can by all means do that, and then you can keep adding them. You have your clock widgets, your battery widgets, and you have different sizes and different types. So customize this however you want and however you see fit. And if you just want to leave it completely blank, you can do that as well. So when you actually rotate from landscape to portrait, the widgets change. So let me show you what I mean. So now you can see that the wallpaper is actually a little bit different. It's still kind of covering up the time a little bit. We still have the same font and the font style and the font color, but you can see that the widgets are completely gone. So in order to add widgets, you press on this down here, and these widgets are actually going to be different, and they're actually going to come in front of the Earth itself. So the widget, I'm going to put this Apple Pencil one, this one, and you can only add up to 4 different small ones or 2 bigger ones, and then you can see that they are different. So those are going to stay right there, and then when I go back to landscape, You then have the widgets that we previously had on the left-hand side. So that's just what the case is. If you go to portrait, you can only fit a few widgets. If you go landscape, you can fit many more. And it's always going to be right underneath the clock on portrait mode and then always on the left-hand side on landscape mode. You cannot move it to the right side. But that is your lock screen in a nutshell. Then you press done. Then it's right then and there, ready to go, and you can select it whenever you see fit. So that is everything that you need to know about the lock screen. You have your widgets, your font color, your fonts, your wallpapers, and it's an amazing thing to see. I'm a big fan of the customization. But before we continue and get into the home screen, let's talk about channel sponsor Paperlike, because we are rocking their awesome screen protector and they got some awesome deals. Let's get into it. Paperlike was one of the first iPad accessories that I'd ever tried. The moment that I got my 2018 iPad Pro, I knew I'd have to get the screen protector and it never disappointed. So now, 5 years later, Paperlike has just released their new version 2.1 or their Swiss Paperlike. The Swiss Paperlike still uses the nanodot layer but is now spread more evenly across the surface of that screen protector in order to further minimize refractions, which was the main complaint that I would hear, so that's been totally fixed. This also allows for a crispier and more clear visual experience. It still has that amazing Paperlike feel that we've grown to love, but now they are offering even better overall visibility and clarity during use. It seems like they've perfected the iPad screen protector, especially for those who love to use their Apple Pencil. Paperlike is still celebrating the holiday season, so until the end of this month, January of 2024, Paperlike will be adding their digital Pro Planner for any hardware purchase. So even if you buy their pencil grip, you will get the Pro Planner 100% free, which is normally $12.99. So if you or someone you know just got a brand new iPad for the holiday season, the Swiss Paperlike is an absolute must accessory for that iPad. If you want to support the channel and support a great brand, click the link below to find out more. Thanks to Paperlike for partnering up with 9to5Mac. Now let's get back to the video and learn how to use your brand new iPad. So now that we got the lock screen out of the way, let's move to the home screen and just swipe up, and that is how you will get from the lock screen to the home screen for those people that have never used an iPad before. And then you're greeted with your home screen, and in terms of what you're seeing here, I've already customized mine the way that I like to see it customized. So I have my widgets on the left-hand side, I have my dock, so these are my most used apps I'd like to put on here, and then I have my app library, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But if you just got a new iPad, you probably won't see too many widgets on here. You'll probably see a few widgets. You'll see the applications that Apple pre-installed on you. You'll have the dock, and then you'll also have something called the suggested apps, as well as your app library. So you'll see this button right here. So this brings you to your app library, and then if you go to your suggested apps or your most recent apps, let's say I go to an application that isn't actually on the dock itself, it'll then show up over here. So here you have your most recently used apps that don't actually show up on the dock, and then you have your app library. So that is how you're going to navigate this. But the same thing applies to the home screen that we talked about with the lock screen. It is fully customizable to what you want to see. So if you long press on the home screen itself, you're into wiggle mode or jiggle mode or whatever we want to call it. And that allows you to move widgets around, to add widgets, as well as add different applications. So for instance, if I want to add widgets, I just press this top left button, and then you'll get the suggested widgets that Apple will suggest to you. And you can see there's different size ones. And then you have all the applications that have corresponding widgets. So for instance, if I want to get a music widget, you'll see that there's multiple sizes for these widgets. So the widgets are, this is the small size one, then you have your medium size one, you have your big one, and then you have your XL one. So not every single widget or every single application has every single size widget, but these are the 4 size widgets that you're gonna see most often. You have your small, your medium, your large, and then your extra large. And then to add a widget like this, all you have to do is press add widget, and you can see that it adds the widgets to the entire screen itself. And if I wanna move it to another screen, I just drag it to the side, and then drop it off, and now I have a brand new screen that I can then navigate with these 3 dots down here. So these 3 dots help you navigate between screen to screen, and also you can swipe left and right for those screens as well. And then when you're done, you can just tap on the screen, and then you're done and it stops jiggling, and that is permanently going to sit there. Now when it comes to widgets, I'm going to add a couple more on here just to show you exactly what it's like. So I'm going to add a small one. Let's add this widget. You can actually move widgets around and put them into any spot. So this is actually a relatively new feature. Before, Apple would not let you just let a widget float around. It would go from the top left corner to the right hand side. So now wherever you want to put a widget, as long as there's a space available, you can move those widgets wherever you want. That's how I was able to recreate this little view right here, which gives me pretty much all I need to do: my weather, my shortcuts from HomeKit, my battery life, scores for the upcoming game, my Apple Card balance, and then some relevant news as well. One thing that I will mention is that when it comes to iPad applications, if you do want to add applications on here, let's say I want to grab something from the app library and grab this test flight, it's always going to default the application to the top left. So if I want to grab this app and move it over here and leave it over here, it will not let me do that. So that is why I like to keep my home screen relatively clean, only have my most used applications down here on my dock, as well as my most used or glanceable data widgets over here. And then from there, I'll look up the actual application that I want to with Spotlight. So a few more things to take into consideration on the home screen and how to navigate everything. We're going to talk about the dock and folders next. So the dock, you can fit up to 15 separate applications and as much as 18 when you have your most recently and your app library. Which for me, that's more than enough for the applications that I use. Like these are the applications that I use most often, so that's why I like to keep them there. But if you want to add even more, you can technically create folders as well. So let's say I want to create a folder. All I have to do is grab this app right here and put it over another app, and then it's going to create a folder for me. And then it's going to automatically name it, but then you can name it up here by pressing that X button and rename it whatever you want. And then all of a sudden now you have a folder that's ready to go, and you click on here and it'll open that folder. But if you want to get rid of that folder, you just drag this back out, then drag out the notes application as well, and it'll completely get rid of that folder. If I put this here, you can see that the folder is gone. Grab the notes application, move it back to where it was, and that is how you're kind of navigating the screen. So you just hold down the applications, move them around, and eventually you'll get to that customization point that you really like. So that is the actual dock, that is folders, that is the home screen. And then lastly, I do want to bring up the app library. The app library is where everything is going to end up going after you download it. So again, I'm somebody that likes to keep myself very clean. I don't like to have any applications here on the home screen because I like the clean canvas of an iPad, which is a beautiful thing to see. So there are applications that I download from time to time that I don't use on a daily basis, but maybe I use it on a weekly or a monthly or just every now and then. That's going to go into my app library. There are two ways to access your app library. The first one being this button right here. You tap on that. It takes you to your app library, and these are categorized based on what Apple thinks and what these applications are categorized in the App Store. You cannot really customize how the app library is done. This is all automatically done through Apple. But another way to access your app library is just to swipe all the way to your farthest kind of home screen, and it's going to take you to that app library. So that's one thing to note. If it doesn't show up on the iPad itself, then it's going to show up in the app library. So now let's get into actually navigating the iPad. We've customized our home screen and lock screen. We know where all of the applications that we want to use are. We know where the widgets are. But now how do we navigate everything, right? So let's say I open up a Safari tab. In order to actually navigate, all you have to do is find out where this little bar is, and that's how you're able to close out of applications and go back to your home screen. So you can swipe up and you're back to the home screen. So open that up and swipe up. And same thing is going to apply if you're in portrait mode as well. So that is how you actually navigate and get out of there. There's another way to close an app, and that's if you use your 5-finger gesture. So if you use all 5 fingers and squeeze down, it's going to close that application, and that's going to work for any application. So if I open up, let's say, something like YouTube and close it down, it's going to close that down as well. Something that's a little bit quicker if you don't want to actually swipe up and use the bar. You also have some other gestures. So for instance, if I open up YouTube and use 4 fingers, you can actually swipe across to open up different applications or your most recent applications. So you can swipe across with 4 fingers if you're kind of toggling between 3 or 4 different apps just for easy access, which is awesome to see. And it'll go back as far as you possibly can, depending on how many applications you have open. And then to see all those open applications and see how many are open, you just swipe up, and then you see that this is your multitasking window. So this multitasking window allows you to see which applications are open, how many are open, and it allows you to get rid of them if you need to reset it. So one thing that I will notice is if for some reason an app freezes or crashes, 95% of the time, if you just close out that application and then open it again, it'll fix that problem. If something else happens or persists, then you definitely have to reach out to that app. But for the most part, if you go into multitasking and close out of the application, it'll kind of reset that application, reset it in the RAM, and then it'll open up how it's intended. Some other important gestures to consider is that if you swipe down from the middle, you get your notification bar. So basically what that does is that brings up your kind of quasi lock screen because you can see that you have access to your widgets, but it also brings up all the different notifications that you've received over the past few days, and you can scroll through them. And then to swipe them away, you just swipe to the left to get rid of them if you want to. You can tap into them to get more when it comes to that relevant actual notification or that app, and you can kind of navigate like that. And then to get out of there, you just swipe back up. And then one more gesture to consider and know about is to find your control center, which is you swipe from the top right. This is going to give you quick access to things like airplane mode and AirDrop, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth connectivity, setting focus modes, brightness levels, volume levels, your HomeKit, but you can also customize it a little bit, which we'll touch on later on, because these are all customizable buttons, so you can actually access maybe applications or sections of applications directly from the actual control center. So definitely learn the control center because you're going to be using this a lot. So the next thing I want to talk about is app multitasking. Now, depending on how you're going to use your iPad, like I use my iPad mostly for productivity stuff. I edit videos on it, thumbnails, but I also like to do a lot of content consumption, but also take notes on the content that I'm watching. So having a side-by-side view of 2 different applications or even 2 instances of the same application is definitely important no matter what situation or what scenario or what use case you have on your iPad. So there's a few ways to get into multitasking. So let's open up a Safari tab, and the first one I'm going to show you is the one that's kind of actually visible. So on the top here, every application in iPadOS will have these 3 dots. These 3 dots, if you tap on it, will allow you to then pick a full screen, go into split view, go into slide over, or close out that application. And then you see down here that you also have an app shelf. Some applications allow for multiple instances of that application, like for Safari. Obviously, it makes sense that you might need to have two Safari windows at the same time, so adding a Safari window allows you to do that. But to get into split view, it's very simple. You press the split view button, and then it's going to move it out of the way, and then you're going to pick a second application. So for this one, for instance, I'm going to pick YouTube. And then you can see that I have two different applications running at the same exact time with this little bar in the middle, which we'll touch on in a second. But you're able to scroll between this one, scroll in this one. You can actually tap on a video and have that video playing while you're scrolling over here. You can highlight stuff from here if you want to and move it over here if you have a notes application. So multitasking is great. It works exactly how it's intended. It pretty much just opens up two iPad apps side by side. And then you can change the size of it with this middle bar right here. So you can go as far left as to here, and then you can even bring this all the way over here if you want to as well. So again, with the YouTube situation, you probably wouldn't make it that small, but it is a possibility if maybe, let's say you're scrolling through Twitter on this side, and then you want to have this open over here. I think it's a great solution. And then you might have seen that there's something called slide over. So if I tap on here again and press slide over, what that does is it creates a floating window. So you can see that Safari is now a floating window that is moving around. You can move it all the way to the right-hand side, move it to the left-hand side if you want to, but basically it creates a floating window over a full screen window application. And then to close it out, you close it out the same exact way that you did with the large screen multitasking, which is you grab this bar right here, you swipe up, get it out of there, and then it's gone. So that is the first way to multitask. These three buttons right here will allow you to multitask manually. But now another way to multitask is, you see this bar down here? If you move over to the left or right of that bar and swipe up just a little bit, it brings up the dock. Now, if I swipe up quickly, it's going to get rid of the application and go back to the home screen. But if you swipe up slowly, then it brings up the dock itself. Now, another way to multitask is if you hold down something like Safari, you see that right now it's in slide overview, but if I bring it to the left or bring it to the right, it's going to open up this split view, which is the same exact thing that we did before. So that is way number 2 to touch on multitasking and be able to get side-by-side view. And there is one more. So it has to do with the 3 dots, but if you don't actually want to press the 3 dots, you can just swipe down and bring you to that same menu. So basically what it does, it'll move this app to the side. So let's say you want to open something like the Files application, it'll open up that Files app and you'll be able to kind of go through the Files app, pick whatever you need while also scrolling over here. And if you want to have a third application open, you can actually grab Safari again to get another instance of Safari, go to the middle here, and it's going to open up a slide over window. So technically, no matter which iPad you have, you can have up to 3 different apps open at the same time and different instances of that app. Like if I want 3 Safaris open, I can do that as well. But that is your multitasking 101. You basically have your 3 dots to manually do it, you have your dock pull up to be able to manually do it as well, and then you have your swipe down. And then if you swipe down on one of these, it'll actually move that one out of the way. So for instance, if you want to get rid of Safari but keep Files, you swipe down on the Safari section and open up, let's say, HomeKit, and now you have HomeKit side by side with your Files application. So that is everything you need to know when it comes to multitasking, split view, slide over. We're going to get into Stage Manager, but Stage Manager is for a different type of iPad that's a little bit more consolidated and niche, but every single iPad can do everything that I just did here. So I know this is a bit of a long video, but I want to make sure that everybody has all the tools they need to get started with the iPad, because the iPad is one of the best tools that I've ever personally used, both on the leisure side and the productivity work side. So because it can do a lot of everything. We're going to touch on a lot of stuff, so definitely stay subscribed, because the iPad is such an infinite canvas when it comes to tools and leisure activities and content consumption, that the iPad, there's a lot more that you can do with it than what you think you can, even if it is that lower entry-level iPad as well. But the next thing I do want to do is touch on the settings. So if we go into settings, I want to touch on the kind of the most important settings that you should really take a look at in terms of how you want to set up your iPad when you first get started. So what I like to do first is go to display and brightness and decide whether you like to go with light mode or dark mode. Now for me, I kind of switch between both of them depending on the time of day. You can set it up to do an automatic switch depending on the time of day, but basically, this is the version of light mode. If I press on dark mode, it's going to darken everything. It's a little bit more reflective, and that's why I usually stay in light mode when I'm recording, but you can see that it changes all of the interface to go to this dark look. So depending on which iPad you have, the dark mode sometimes saves you a little bit of battery because it's less pixels it has to fire, or less brightness technically, but I do like the light mode, especially when recording the actual screen itself. But you can decide between light mode and dark mode, and then you can actually toggle this automatic button on and then go to the options, and then you can set it so it'll actually go from light mode to dark mode when it gets dark outside and vice versa, or you can set a completely custom schedule on when you want light mode versus dark mode. Again, I like to manually set it whenever I need to, and there is a shortcut right here in your settings application or your control center, which is light mode versus dark mode. This button right here will take you to dark mode, and then if you press it again, it'll toggle it back to light mode. So different ways to access it, but this is the display and brightness setting menu. You can change your brightness level here manually if you want to. I like to kind of let it do its thing. Normally it's set with ambient light, but I like to have it really bright when I'm making these videos. And then you have something called True Tone. So True Tone is always on for me because it changes the hue of a blue light versus more of a warmer light depending on the time of day, how close the iPad is to your face, to make sure that you're not getting a ton of blue light all the time. So if you turn this off, you might see a shift in the color to become a little bit more blue. If I turn it back on, it should kind of get a little bit warmer, as you notice right there. So that's just something that I like to personally keep on. Another few important things when it comes to security especially is the auto lock feature. So auto lock, I keep it at 15 minutes because again, I don't want it to die on me or kind of go into the lock screen mode when I am recording in the background. But for most people, I'll suggest doing either 2 or 5 minutes because the last thing you want is to leave your iPad unlocked, maybe in a public setting, and technically they can kind of get into whatever they want if the iPad is fully unlocked. So basically what it does is after 15 minutes, it will lock the iPad if it's left alone. I would recommend setting it to maybe a 2 or 5 minute toggle. And then obviously you can leave it on never, so it'll never actually auto lock and it'll just keep the screen on, but that's really bad for battery life. And then you have your lock and unlock toggle here. And basically what this does is if you have a smart cover, it'll just lock the actual iPad itself when you do put the smart cover on. And then one more thing I want to mention when it comes to the look and feel of the iPad is this thing called display zoom. So display zoom changes the actual size of the application. So I like to keep it on more space because it allows you to kind of see more. So you can see how small the icons are right here. I'm going to go over here and you'll be able to see that the icons are this size. But if I go to the one that's even less space, so display zoom, and I do larger text, press done, use zoomed, it's going to do a little springboard reset. And then you can see that everything is just much, much bigger. We'll press done. I look up. The widgets are the same size, but you can see that the actual apps are a little bit different, and it actually had to move applications out of my dock into the actual home screen itself because it didn't fit. You can see how much bigger those are. So I'm going to go back to the settings because I don't like the look of this, but if you're somebody that needs to have larger text, by all means go for it. I'm going to press done here. It's going to do a quick little reset, and you can see that my app sizes are back to normal, and I can grab this, drag it back into my dock, and I'm good to go. So definitely something to take into consideration and make sure that you get to the right size that you prefer and whatever is easier for you to see. Now I did mention that you can customize your control center and what exactly shows up on there. There are a few that you cannot customize, so everything from the focus mode, the brightness, and the volume and up, those are permanent and they're non-customizable. They're going to be there no matter what, but it makes sense because it is the most important thing and the most kind of frequent thing that you mess with. But if you want to customize the rest of it, you go to your control center and you can see down here that you have a bunch of different options to add and remove. So for instance, if I go over here, you can see that I have the actual Apple TV remote down there. If I want to remove that, just press remove. Then I scroll down here and you can see that it's completely gone. And if I want to add it again, all I have to do is press the plus sign. So you can go through here, see which ones are the most important to you, add them, remove them, and then customize it to however you see fit. And then even if you want to see the order, so if I want to move the Apple TV, grab the hamburger menu, bring it all the way to the top, then the Apple TV remote will be all the way at the top over here instead of all the way down here. So just some things to consider. If you do want to customize your control center, by all means, go for it. This is the menu to do it on. And these are all Apple first-party applications. For right now, no third-party application can give you a control center widget, for instance. And then finally, the most important piece has to be the Face ID and passcode. So I'm going to put my passcode in. And this is where all your security lives, because if somebody has your passcode and you don't have Face ID on, then they pretty much have access to a lot of sensitive information, which is going to be fixed with iPadOS 17.3. But still, if you don't have Face ID turned on or Touch ID turned on, mostly Face ID nowadays, but there still is some Touch ID. But these are all the settings that you need to know. So for instance, for using a Face ID, you can toggle on what you want to be able to use with Face ID. So iPod Unlock, of course, wallets and Apple Pay. I definitely want to use Face ID for Apple Pay and stuff like that. iTunes and App Store, so basically whenever you download a brand new application, it's going to ask for your Face ID, and then password autofill. This is a big one because let's say you're logging into a bank account or you're logging into some sensitive information, you definitely want Face ID turned on if you do have that autofill turned on. And the next thing you have down here is set up an alternate appearance. So when you first turn on your iPad, depending on if you have a Touch ID or Face ID, it's going to actually have you turn that on and actually have you set that up. Now, sometimes maybe you're a person that wears glasses on a daily basis, whether they are prescription or sunglasses, or maybe you're somebody that wears a hat a lot of the time. Maybe your first ID will be without glasses and without that hat, but maybe you want to set up a second appearance with a hat and those glasses on to kind of make sure that it always unlocks. Because technically, if you do have glasses on, Face ID should work, but I would say when you have glasses and a hat on, it works maybe 90% of the time, not every single time. So if you set up an alternate appearance, it'll help out to actually get the Face ID to work much quicker when you have those glasses and that hat on. And then the last thing I do want to mention in this menu right here is this section that says allow access when locked. So basically what that allows you to turn off and on is if your iPad is locked, you would sometimes get notifications to your iPad. So even if it is locked, it'll kind of blur out exactly what's being seen or even remove whatever is being seen in that notification menu. So for instance, if I go back to Face ID and passcode and scroll down, if let's say I don't want to have people access my control center when the screen is locked, I can just turn that off, then actually lock my iPad, tap on here, and if I swipe down, it's not going to let me pull up the control center. So versus when I have that toggled on, it will let me pull down control center even though my iPad is locked. So just go through these settings and see exactly what works for you. I like to keep these all relatively turned on just because I want easy access to it, and not a lot of people are using my iPad, and I don't really leave the iPad anywhere outside of my desk. But that is what you need to know when it comes to Face ID and passcode. Make sure you set it up and make sure you have the correct settings set up for you and your use cases, because who knows, maybe you have a bunch of sensitive information, or maybe you just have a bunch of applications and you don't want your kid to do a bunch of in-app purchases without your permission and without your Face ID. And now the final thing I want to bring up that kind of talks about all the iPads in general is the battery life. Battery life is something that's very hit or miss with iPads. My iPad is the M1 iPad Pro, so I've been using it for a while. I don't follow the best battery practices, but some things to take a note of is to make sure you kind of looking over here and seeing exactly what applications are taking up the most amount of battery. So if I click on this right here, it lets me know what I did on Wednesday. It looks like LumaFusion, my video editing app, is taking up 67% of my battery, which is about an hour and a half of usage. And the USB connector, 7 hours, only took up 11%. So depending on what application, how intense it is, how often you use it, it could hurt your battery more or less. And then also take note of this new low power mode that came with iPadOS 16, which allows you to go into low power mode very similarly to how low power mode is ignited on iOS and iPhone. So that's everything that you need to know when it comes to a get started guide, everything you need to know with navigation and gestures and making sure that you can multitask on any iPad. The last section I do want to touch on is Stage Manager. So Stage Manager is only available on M-powered iPads as well as an A12X and an A12Z powered iPad Pro. So basically a 2018 iPad Pro of either the 11 or the 12.9 inch size or newer, and then also the M1 iPad Air or newer, depending on when you're watching this, that could change. But so the iPad mini and the 10th gen iPad do not have access to Stage Manager, and to turn it on, there's one of two ways to turn it on. Go into your settings, go into your multitasking and gestures, you can press this button right here called Stage Manager. So as you can see, when I did Stage Manager, it made the actual settings screen a little bit smaller, and you have this little nub right here. So this allows you to resize the settings menu, it allows you to resize applications, and I can actually add more applications very similarly to how any other desktop computer works. I pull up maybe the Safari over here. I now have a floating window of Safari that I can resize, so make this a little bit smaller. Let's go to ESPN.com. And basically, it's a way to let you actually have multiple applications open at the same time with floating windows, and lets you move them around however you see fit. And there is a nice little inertia. You're able to kind of customize it however you want. It basically allows you to have 4 floating windows up at the same time, and also gives you the shelf over here, which allows you to have 4 different windows open at the same time in each one of these instances and each one of these shelves. So whenever I open these up, it'll just kind of open that up together. And for instance, this one had 3 apps open at the same time. It'll open up all those apps at the same time. So that's one way to access Stage Manager. And the other way is in your control center, you can actually turn it off and on, and then it'll bring you to split view right here. So that is Stage Manager in a quick little nutshell. I'll link a video down below of a real in-depth walkthrough of everything that Stage Manager has. But again, this is only available for 2018 iPad Pros and newer, as well as the M1 iPad Air or any M-powered computer. But that is everything you need to know when it comes to a starter guide and when it comes to your iPad. Let's finish up this video and get out of here. So that will do it for this video, everybody. If you did make it to the end, thank you so much, because I know this is going to be a long one. Leave a little dolphin so I know you made it to the end in the comments down below. And leave some other comments down below if you learned something new. What's one thing that you picked up from this video that you didn't know before? I want to know if you walked away from this video with a better iPad experience and better knowledge of how to use your iPad moving forward, and now you can fully maximize it in 2024 and really enjoy the beast that this iPad is, whether it is an iPad Pro or an iPad 10th generation. I purposely omitted a lot of the Apple Pencil and Magic Keyboard stuff because we're going to have a separate video covering that. And we already have a video talking all about the Apple Pencil and the different versions of the Apple Pencil, so I'll link that down below. But if you did make it to the end, like I mentioned, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below. And if you guys want to watch some more iPadOS, macOS, or iOS videos, click on one of these right here, and definitely stay tuned for some visionOS and Vision Pro content in the very near future. But until next time, I'm Fernando. Enjoy your iPads, everybody. And thank you to Paperlike for partnering up with 9to5Mac and continuously supporting us. Definitely check them out in the link down below. It's a must-have for any new iPad owner. Until next time, peace.